A sudden snow squall slashes across the Tibetan plateau, turning prayer flags into neon streaks in the wind. You're standing at the newly reopened trailhead of the Kailash Manasarova pilgrimage, closed for 5 long years and now buzzing with the first wave of 750 lottery-picked trekkers. One pilgrim touches a wristwatch, frowns, and shows you the display. The time has jumped 2 hours forward, even though you've only marched 20 paces. A Chinese ranger shrugs, calls it just magnetics, then warns that phones, compasses, and sometimes memories get scrambled out here. As he speaks, the clouds shred apart, and Mount Kailash, perfect, blinding, symmetrical, erupts into view like a 4-sided diamond lifted straight out of legend. From this distance, the peak seems impossibly engineered. Each of its faces meets the next at clean right angles, and the summit's pyramidal cap reflects even the faint moonlight like polished steel. Drone operators later swear their GPS signals ricocheted in tight circles, tracing a geometry too tidy to be coincidence. Locals prefer the simpler explanation. The mountain is a mandala carved by gods, so precise that climbing it would be like smudging sacred ink. But if stone can hold such symmetry, what other laws might buckle in its shadow? And that's the riddle that keeps adventurers awake tonight. Because somewhere behind those gleaming walls hide stories of aging in minutes, lakes that refuse the rules of color, and a summit no human has ever stepped on, despite bribes, bless me boots, and the best gear on earth. To see why, we first have to pry open the mountain's geometry itself, and then watch how that geometry messes with the clocks in our pockets. Look up from Darchan Bazaar, and Kailash looks less like a mountain than a wireframe rendered by some cosmic KD program. All 4 faces, north, south, east, west, rise in near flat plains of Triassic limestone, meeting at edges sharp enough to slice sunlight. Geologists say the shape formed when India slammed into Asia, tilting sedimentary beds into a petrified pagoda, but pilgrims counter that no earthquake chisels 90-degree corners. Russian researchers once floated an even weirder hypothesis. They mapped the peak's slopes and found a ratio eerily close to the Golden Spiral, prompting headlines that Kailash might be the world's largest ancient pyramid, an artifact, not an accident. Mainstream scientists roll their eyes, yet the satellite data does show that the mountain casts a near-perfect square shadow at equinox, aligning precisely with the cardinal points. Stand beside Lake Rakshastal on a windless dawn, and the rock behaves like a mirror, throwing back the sky in a clean reflection broken only by ripples of silver fish. Climber Reinhold Messner, invited to summit in the mid-1980s, said the stone seemed machined. That invitation, by the way, is the closest anyone has come to legal access, and Messner declined, claiming conquest here would break something in other people's souls. The precision isn't only horizontal. Seismic scans show the faces tilt at roughly 13-degree increments, mirroring mythic measurements in Buddhist mandalas and Hindu Vedic altars. Could tectonics really have composed an accidental prayer diagram? Even skeptics admit it's statistically improbable. What's certain is that geometry fuels devotion. Pilgrims circumambulate because they believe each step traces concentric rings of a cosmic drawing, like ants walking the lines of a chalk yantra. Yet symmetry alone doesn't keep climbers away. Other sacred peaks, Fuji, Sinai, have trails to the top. Kailash's geometry merely sets the stage for stranger physics. Because trekkers swear that the mountain's angles funnel energy, and energy, they say, bends time. To test that, we follow the path clockwise, toward the pass, where wristwatches go haywire. On the barren saddle of Dolma Pass, 5,630 meters above sea level, oxygen thins to a greedy whisper. Pilgrims string prayer flags and toss lung tar papers into the gale. Each paper carries a mantra and perhaps a timestamp from another dimension. Visitors report that camera batteries drain in minutes, Fitbits log heart rates double the actual pulse, and digital clocks either freeze or sprint ahead. The most viral tale surfaced this January when an Indian trekker uploaded a video claiming his nails had grown 3 days' worth overnight. Doctors blame altitude-induced edema, but even physicians concede they can't replicate the phenomenon to nearby peaks of similar height. Blog forums light up with words like electromagnetic anomaly and gravitational lensing. Chinese geophysicists once set magnetometers along the Kora Trail and logged spikes strong enough to flip a compass 180 degrees, only to have readings return to normal a kilometer away. Their unpublished white paper floated a theory of piezoelectric stress inside crystalline limestone, essentially Kailash ringing like a buried tuning fork whenever tectonic plates flex. That might scramble electronics, but biology? No solid proof yet. Tibetan monks need no peer review. They say the mountain's guardian deities accelerate karma, so a week here can rewrite a lifetime's moral ledger. Buddhist texts describe the summit as Demchok's wheel of time. Stand too close, they warn, and the wheel spins you forward or backward without mercy. Modern skeptics rented high-speed cameras to film a pendulum clock on the shore of Lake Manasarova. The footage showed no measurable time dilation, but the researchers packed up early after their hard drives kept auto-erasing at night. Correlation? Coincidence? Or did they edge too near the mountain's unseen circuit breaker? Their failure only sharpened curiosity. If the base scrambles ours, what chaos waits higher up? And how do two neighboring lakes play into the puzzle? South of Kailash lie two water bodies that behave like opposing moods of the same mind. Lake Manasarova is an almost perfect circle, sapphire blue and fresh enough to drink. Pilgrims bathe here at dawn, believing a single sip washes lifetimes of sin. Less than 5 kilometers away, Lake Rakshastal curves like a crescent scar, its brackish water lifeless, its shoreline cracked and white with salt. Locals refuse to camp there after dark, calling it the Lake of the Demon King. Hydrologists scratch their heads. Twin lakes at near identical elevation, fed by similar glaciers, should share chemistry. Yet Manasarova stays fresh, while Rakshastal measures saltier than some ocean coves. Researchers traced an underground channel called Ganga Chu, linking them, but the flow runs counterintuitively, from the fresh lake into the saline one without diluting it. Some blame subterranean vents, pumping mineral brine upward. Others whisper geothermal portals opened by ancient rites. In Hindu lore, the lakes depict the duality of creation and destruction, Brahma's lotus versus Ravana's poison. Buddhists map them onto samsara and nirvana. Every full moon, their surfaces reportedly glow in complementary colors, as if the mountain projects a yin-yang light show onto its watery mirrors. Drones filming in infrared picked up temperature inversions no meteorologist expected. Rakshastal's shore runs warmer at night than Manasarovar's breadth, despite the latter's larger thermal mass. But the real enigma is how the lakes feed 4 colossal rivers, Indus, Sutlej, Brahmaputra, and Karnali, each sprinting toward a different ocean. Step onto a ridge, and you can watch meltwater choose 4 routes, as though the mountain were a switchboard pumping life to nearly 2 billion people downstream. Scientists dub Kailash a water tower. Mystics call it the world's heart, arteries radiating in cardinal direction. If water obeys such strange choreography here, maybe culture does too. Because 4 separate religions, Hindu, Buddhist, Jain, Bon, even an echo in Sikh hymns, crown this lone peak as the throne of their gods. How did a single hunk of limestone win so many crowns, and what happens when mortals try to step on that throne? Hindus picture Lord Shiva meditating on Kailash's summit, dreadlocks shivering in cosmic wind, drum beats marking the rhythm of existence. Ancient Sanskrit epics equate the peak with Mount Meru, the immovable axis around which all galaxies spin. Climb it, says one Purana, and you trespass on the living pivot of the universe. For Tibetan Buddhists, the mountain is the Mandala Palace of Chakrasamvara Demchok, the wrathful deity who unites bliss and emptiness. Monks at Dirapuk Monastery still chant sutras that imagine invisible stairways spiraling up the north face, passable only by bodhisattvas who can turn bone into light. Jains revere Kailash as Astapada, the spot where their first Tirthankara, Rishabdev, attained liberation. Jain records from at least the 12th century describe pilgrimage lines on the south slope worn deep into stone, though geologists claim those grooves are glacial striations. Bon, Tibet's indigenous faith, calls the peak Yungdrung Gutsek, the 9-story swastika at the center of existence. Each floor, they say, houses spirits older than the human species. Even some Sikh texts mention the mountain in verses honoring creation's vastness. Across millennia, Chinese monks, Faxi Yan in the 5th century, Xuanzang in the 7th, wrote of a silver peak that pierces heaven, believed by scholars to reference Kailash. British surveyor William Moorcroft sketched the pyramid in 1812, calling it astonishingly regular, like a crafted monument. When so many faiths draw a bright circle around one summit, politics listens. Beijing officially lists Kailash as a Class 1 sacred mountain, making desecration a crime against cultural heritage. The rule pleases monks and exasperates alpinists. But before the ban calcified, a handful of climbers tried to test the gods. Their stories read like parables of ambition meeting something sturdier than stone. The first surveyor to measure Kailash with summiting in mind was British officer Hugh Rutledge in 1926. He labeled the peak feasible but inviolable, shelving plans after local lamas gasped in horror. Half a century later, China dangled the ultimate lure in front of Reinhold Messner, still fresh off Everest without oxygen. Messner walked away, famously warning that to subdue Kailash would be to vandalize human reverence itself. Rumor says a Soviet team tried a clandestine ascent in 1980. No paperwork, no bodies, just whispers of tents shredded overnight by winds that sounded like chanting. The only documented approach came from a Spanish group in 2001. Chinese officials first okayed the permit, then rescinded it amid global outrage, codifying the permanent ban that stands today. No ropes, no crampons, no exceptions. Does the mountain actively punish arrogance? Tibetan folklore cites the 11th century yogi Milarepa, who allegedly sprinted up the sheer south face on a beam of sunlight, then descended and forbade anyone else from repeating the feat. Locals recall a 1970s Chinese mountaineering class whose topographer slipped on clear sky, his boot print smashed onto thin air, witnesses claim, as if the mountain had erased the ground beneath him. No newspapers archive the incident, but the story surfaces whenever someone whispers, what if we try? Alpinists point out more concrete obstacles. Each face ends in overhanging cornices that shed avalanches like trapdoors, and the limestone is so brittle that a single piton could bring down a cathedral's worth of rock, according to veteran climber Carlos Bueller. But technical danger never stopped climbers elsewhere. What stops them here is invisible, part legal statute, part moral firewall woven from billions of prayers. Yet science has found a loophole. If boots can't go up, sensors can look inside. And 2026 may be the year those sensors arrive. Next summer, geophysicists will gather at the 21st International Conference on Ground-Penetrating Radar in Vienna, where a Chinese-Nepali consortium plans to unveil detailed proposals for a non-invasive subsurface scan of Kailash's glaciers. Their draft, leaked to academic forums, outlines drone-towed GPR arrays capable of mapping ice layers 200 meters deep without landing a single probe. The project slots neatly into the IPA-INITI initiative, targeting harmonized ground ice datasets by late 2026. If approved, the survey could confirm or crush the old legends. Are there hollow chambers inside the peak? Do symmetrical stress lines hint at artificial corridors? Do the glaciers conceal paleoclimatic records stretching back to the last ice age? Supporters say the data will refine water security models for Asia's 4 major rivers. Critics worry the scans might tempt future mining or even militarization. One Beijing official, speaking anonymously, hinted that climbing permits could be re-evaluated if remote imaging proves no spiritual risk. That single phrase has already sparked furious debate across Tibetan monasteries. Meanwhile, remote sensing teams on the Qinghai Tibet Plateau have begun using machine learning augmented GPR to map permafrost elsewhere, and Kailash sits squarely in their crosshairs. Early tests show permafrost thickness here has scarcely changed while surrounding ranges melt, fuel for conspiracy theorists who claim the mountain is refrigerated from within, like a cosmic server room. If bureaucrats greenlight the 2026 scan, the first images may resemble a medical X-ray of a deity, exposing the veins under the marble skin. Will that demystify Kailash or make it more miraculous? Scholars argue both outcomes are possible at once, a quantum superposition of faith and evidence. Whatever unfolds, viewers of this documentary might witness a tipping point, the moment humanity decides whether it can study a mystery without trying to own it. And that decision tees up a final question, one that no drone, no sensor, no algorithm can answer. By the time you finish this film, another pilgrim will have stepped onto the Kora Trail, whispering mantras into a wind that smells of juniper and ozone. Their watch might glitch, their shadow might seem too long, their heartbeat might sync with prayer drums echoing off 4 luminous walls. But when they circle back to Darchen, they'll discover something stranger than time loops or magnetic fields. An untouched summit still gleaming above them, inviolate and silent, proof that wonder can survive even our era of satellites and live streams. Mount Kailash leaves every seeker with a choice etched as sharply as its ridgelines. We can measure, model, and maybe someday X-ray the stone, or we can let the summit remain a mirror that shows us who we are when conquest is not an option. Either path leads to knowledge, but only one preserves the hush that makes the mountains sacred in the first place. So if you ever find yourself on that windswept plateau, whether for science, for scripture, or for sheer curiosity, remember the pilgrim's rule. Walk clockwise, leave no footprint higher than yak grass, and when the diamond peak flashes at sunset, bow out of the frame. Some altitudes are meant for reverence, not records. And in a world that measures almost everything, perhaps the greatest mystery is the one mountain still teaching us how to stop climbing and simply stand in awe.